Hello, welcome back for day 3 of Sun Salutations. As mentioned on day 1, just like making pancakes, sometimes the first batch or so turns out a little differently than expected. So thanks for joining me for this start to this 30-day challenge. Let's get started. I'll meet you on the mat. Make sure you have whatever you need to be comfortable, whether that's a blanket or a towel to create cushion for your knees, or some water or tea nearby for if you get thirsty. Also remember to move at your pace, whether that's the breath or the movements I'm guiding. You don't need to keep up with me. You also don't have to wait for me. Move at whatever pace works for you today. Be the boss of your own body and experience. Without further ado, I'll meet you on the mat. Come on down to hands and knees for tabletop. If you don't have a blanket or a towel, hi Jag, says my cat Jag. He loves the yoga. As I was saying, if you don't have a blanket or a towel handy to create cushion for your knees, you can kind of hack it with your mat by first dragging it towards you to kind of create slack in the middle. See this here? And once you've done that enough, depending on the cat load on your mat, you can sort of fold the mat over on itself so that you have a nice little squishy spot for your knees. Hey, buddy. Hey, buddy. Maybe you're having a similar pet experience right now. He's probably going to be around all month. So find a space for your hands right underneath your shoulders. Bring your knees right underneath your hips. Take your knees a little wider than hips now. And bring your heels together behind you. If it feels okay for your knees, send your hips down and back for child's pose. If you have knee sensitivity, just lay down on your belly. Just stretch out long. You can also roll up a blanket or towel and place it behind your knees to release, to just soften that bend if this is accessible for you in child's pose today. Reach your hands forward. Notice the texture of the mat or the floor underneath them. And take a moment to check in with your breath. If you'd like, you can stack your palms face down for a little forehead pillow. Begin to make that soft whisper sound in the back of your throat with each inhale and exhale. Creating a sound like an ocean wave as you breathe. Become your own noise machine. Your own white noise machine. You can use this ujjayi breath to stay connected to your breathing throughout your movement practice. It's easy to hold our breath when we get distracted by going through the motions of life. Creating this soft whisper sound in the back of your throat just gives you something to connect to return to, even brings a slightly more tactile quality to your breath. So just play with that. Finish the breath cycle you're on and prepare to move, easing our way in. On your next inhale, unfold your hands if you have them stacked and walk them off to the side, off to the left of your mat. And press into your right palm in particular, pressing it down into the earth, feeling a nice stretch in your right armpit. Breathe in, inflating your right side body from hip to fingertips. Let that go. Walk your hands back to center. Maybe pet the pet. Pause in child's pose again. And when you're ready, inhale to walk your hands over to the right this time. Press into your left to get a nice stretch through your armpit. Let your left hip be heavy towards your left heel. Inflating again on the inhale, fanning out your left rib cage, maybe in your mind's eye. After exhaling, letting that go, return to center. And if you have your mat folded over on itself like I do, now's a good time to stretch it back out so we have a nice firm foundation for moving back and forth across. Come forward onto your hands, your elbows, your forearms, whatever works, just so you can tuck your toes and send your hips to the sky. Play around with your stance in downward facing dog. Take both feet wide toward the edges of your mat and do the same with your hands. Notice if this is easier to hold this pose with this stance. Now do the opposite. Bring your hands together so that maybe your thumbs touch in center. And do the same with your feet, bringing either knees to touch, or if they will, bringing your toe knuckles, your big toes to touch in center. Notice how this changes the effort involved in the pose, how easy it is to sort of sway from side to side. Now find neutral, whatever that means for you. Find the most stable version of this shape for you. If your shoulders, wrists, or anything else is tense and tired from this new pose, just come on down to your knees and take tabletop. This is a totally acceptable quadruped pose. So when I say downward facing dog, remember that tabletop here is always an option as well. So from downward facing dog, walk your hands towards your feet. Find a forward fold with your hips lifted. Take opposite elbow and opposite hand and just hang out for a moment. Take a deep breath. Let it go. Release your hands. Inhale, roll up to standing. Find mountain pose. Grounding in both feet. Shift forward so much that maybe your heels lift just a little bit. Now shift backward on your feet, peeling your toes up off the mat. Now shift to the right, coming onto the right side edges of both feet. So the outside edge of your right foot and the inside edge of your left. Now shift to the left. Imagine you're standing on a boat that's leaning the other way. And come back to neutral. And see if you can do all four directions at the same time, pressing into both feet to become taller. Let your legs be strong like two sturdy tree trunks. Take a breath. Let it go. Inhale, hands lift to begin sun salutation A. Reach high overhead, palms touch. Dive forward, hinging at your hips, reaching toward the floor. Inhale to half lift. Make a number 7 with your body. See if you can make your back somewhat flat. Hands can be on shins or on your lap. Just don't put any pressure on your knees. Lead with your heart, diving toward the floor, using your lap to rest your torso on with bent knees if that feels good. Let your head hang in this forward fold, maybe nodding yes, maybe shaking no. Use your hands like feet. Walk them away from your toes. Find your variation of downward facing dog. Just like yesterday, decide if you're opting for softness or effort today. If you're here for effort, stay in down dog for another breath or two. If you're here for softness, come down to tabletop. Go easy on yourself. Build strength in increments. You don't have to start out at 100%. From your down dog or your tabletop pose, find a version of plank. From tabletop, that might look like sending your knees a little farther back so that your hips shift forward, bringing your upper body into this kind of angle here with weight supported by hands right underneath your shoulders. If you'd like more effort today, you can, of course, press into your toes, lifting your knees, keeping your whole body in this straight, angular plank pose. From your version of plank, keep your elbows in close, moving through chaturanga, sinking your heart, your belly towards the floor. You can rest your forehead here for a moment. Squeeze your shoulder blades together behind you. Imagine bringing your elbows close together, still keeping them close to your rib cage. Inhale, press your low ribs or the upper part of your belly into the mat. That's where your diaphragm is. Let it inflate you. Lift your chest, lift your shoulders. Look at the mat in front of you, squeezing shoulder blades together behind. This is cobra. Exhale, peel down. Rest your head again if that feels nice. Inhale to lift again, this time looking over your right shoulder. Exhale, peel down and center. Inhale, peel up, look over your left. Exhale, peel down. Press your hands into the mat, send your hips toward your heels. Take a child's pose. Come forward onto elbows and forearms. Tuck your toes. Glue your entire hands down to the mat so there's no air under your palms, under your knuckles, under your finger pads. Scrub the mat away from your feet so your hips lift. See if you can press into your feet and your hands the same amount. If you're not sure what that feels like, shift forward. Feel the heaviness in your hands. Press into your feet, pull your hips back. See if that feels different. Walk your hands to meet your feet in a forward fold. Inhale through your nose slowly, rolling up to stand slowly. You don't want to spike our blood pressure here. Just honoring the transition from floor to standing and all the effort involved. Take a breath as you rise to stand tall. Nice work. That was Sun Salutation A. Adding on, let's move through a couple cycles of Sun Salutation B, adding Warrior One now on either side. So take a moment to shift forward and back and all around in your feet. Find a neutral place that feels stable. From your tall mountain pose, looking at the imaginary horizon line in front of you, reach your hands high overhead, take a breath in. Sink your hips down and back like there's an imaginary chair slightly too far behind you. To take some weight out of your shoulders, you have the option to make prayer hands, as we call them, or Andjali Mudra, bringing both palms and sets of fingers to touch in center at chest level. Keep breathing. See if you can see your toes in front of your knees. If you can't, scoot your knees back in space just a little bit. See if you can sink a little lower. It might start to feel like you're going to fall down to send your hips so far behind you. I find it helps to reach my arms long in front of me to counterbalance that effect. Release that, dive forward, take a fold, send your hips to the sky. Nod yes with your head. Shake no. Nod yes, ending on the positive. Walk your hands away from your feet. Find tabletop or downward facing dog, preparing for a vinyasa sequence. Remember, you have the option to move through cat-cow or tabletop in general to take a softer variation for this vinyasa. If you're opting for the vinyasa, shift forward to your version of plank, option to lower your knees. Untuck your toes, keep elbows in close, lowering to the floor for chaturanga or crocodile. Squeeze your shoulder blades behind you. Inhale, inflate to lift your chest and shoulders for cobra. Or if you'd like a little more, press into your hands. Lengthen your arms. Press into the tops of your feet to activate your legs, lifting your knees off the mat as well. This is upward facing dog. Find your way back to downward facing dog. I like to lower my knees from up dog. Tuck my toes. Come up to plank. And then lift my hips, sending them up and back for a downward facing dog. Nice work. Inhale, left foot is heavy. Lift your right. Toes stay pointed toward the floor. Exhale as you step forward. Find a runner's lunge. Some adjustments may be required, and that's okay. Take a little step in with your back foot, your left foot. Send your toes about 45 degrees out to the side. Just like in downward facing dog, take a moment to experiment with your stance. You can bring your feet closer to center, the midline, with a more narrow stance to practice more balance, or sending your feet closer to the edges of your mat for a little more stability. Let your front toes face forward, your back toes are off to the side, about 45 degrees. Press into both feet. Imagine tearing the mat in half. You're pressing so firmly with your feet. Lift up, peel your hands off the mat to reach high overhead. Take warrior one. Keep your front knee bent. If you find it's straight and you don't have much space to bend it without bringing your knee very far forward past your foot, then just take that back foot and step it back a little farther. Also peek at your front big toe, your right big toe. See if you can visually find it on the inside of your right bent knee. If not, just scoot your knee out to the side, only enough to see that toe just inside on the floor. Press into your back heel. Activate your back leg to use it like a rudder that sort of steers your hips forward. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just an aiming, a direction. Take one more breath, looking toward the sun. Maybe take your arms a little wider. Send your hands a little farther apart, almost like somebody's handing you a giant basket, as though to say, oh yes, I'm ready for this basket. On an exhale, dive forward, plant your hands, maybe step back a little farther with your back foot, preparing to lift your right foot for three-legged dog, send it back. Nice work. If you find you're a little too far stretched out, you can always take a little hop, shortening your stance. Or you can do the same with little steps with your hands. And bring your right foot to the floor to meet the left. See if you can feel like you're resting in downward facing dog. If you feel kind of out of breath or frantic or faint or just hot from this work, drop your knees. Remember, you have the option to hang out on tabletop instead. From wherever you are, make your way back to a forward fold, stepping hands and feet to meet with hips lifted. Let your head hang. Take a long, slow breath in as you roll up to standing. Nice work. Sun salutation A on the right. I'm sorry, that was incorrect. That was sun salutation B on the right. Now let's do the same on the left. So from your tall mountain pose once more, breathe in as though sucking air from your feet right out of the ground, just right up through your skull like a column of air. On your next breath in, reach your hands up high overhead, palms touch, hinging at your hips, dive forward for a fold. Inhale, roll back up, come all the way to standing. Reach up high again. And exhale, this time send your hips down and back for chair pose. Option to bring your hands to heart center to release the tension in your shoulders. See if you can sink a little bit lower. Maybe play with lifting your toes, really exploring the foundation of your feet. Lifting your toes can activate the supportive arches in your feet. So it can be a fun thing to play with for a little extra challenge in any pose. If your toes are lifted, peel them back down. Dive forward, lift your hips, find forward fold again. Inhale to half lift, make a number 7. Hands to shins or thighs. And exhale, fold, lead with your heart, reach toward the floor. Walk hands and feet apart. Take downward facing dog. Press all your finger pads and knuckles and your palms into the mat. Let your fingers be spread wide. Imagine they're on like gas pedals in the car and kind of press your fingers forward as though you're going to lift your wrists, even though you're not. Shift forward for plank, your version today. Mine includes lowering the knees. Keep elbows in close, lower through chaturanga. Untuck your toes here. Inhale, peel up for cobra, or keep peeling, pressing into hands and feet to lift the knees for upward facing dog. From here, I like to lower my knees and send my hips back for a child's pose sometimes. Coming forward onto elbows and forearms, tuck your toes. Now lift your elbows with active arms, press into hands and feet. Lift up your hips for downward facing dog. Once again, you have the option here in tabletop if that's what's working for you today. And you can still lift your back leg if you'd like to take a variation of bird dog. Just remember that you can always find your own way to participate in whatever's going on. So from your quadruped position, or down dog in my case, lift the left leg long behind, toes still pointed toward the floor. Take a big step forward for a runner's lunge. Take a little step in with your back right foot, pointing those toes out to the side at about 45 degrees angle. Again, finding your foundation, setting your feet up to support you before you lift. When you're ready, release your hands from the mat, come up to stand. Sink into that bent front knee, stepping back if you need to allow space to do so. Again, notice if you can see your big toe just on the inside of your bent knee. when you look at the floor. If not, send it out to the side just a little bit, just until you can see it. Press into your back heel, reaching toward the floor with it, driving your whole back leg with strength to point your hips forward. Again, imagine receiving that giant basket, taking your hands a little wider as you look towards the sky. One more big breath in. Exhale, bow down, dive forward, plant your hands. Maybe ooch your back foot back in space a little more. Step your left foot back, send it up for three-legged dog. Bring your foot to meet its mate on the mat. Find downward facing dog or tabletop. And move through your version of a vinyasa. So finding plank. Sinking to your belly through chaturanga. Elbows in close, grazing your rib cage as you lower. Untuck the toes. Press into the tops of the feet and your hands. As you squeeze your shoulder blades together to lift for cobra. Keep pressing, skimming the knees off the mat as well for upward facing dog. You can flip your feet from here if you'd like to add a little challenge. And then from your plank pose, lift your hips, find downward facing dog. Walk your hands and feet together, however works best for you. Pause in a forward fold. Inhale, lift up, roll up. Come to standing. Nice work. Sun salutation A and B, both sides. Nailed it. See you for day 4 tomorrow.